Welcome to Voices.
A podcast from the Institute for Human Rights and Business.
Here, we're seeking to elevate the range of perspectives
on the role of business in the world
and in people's everyday lives.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of IHRB's Voices podcast. I'm Gunnar Subramaniam for IHRB's Migrant Workers Program in Southeast Asia. On this podcast, we are talking to Nissara Spence. Nissara, or Nina, has more than 5 years of experience in labor migration and human development in Asia, working with the United Nations and engagement with governments, private sector, and civil society. She has been with the IOM, the International Organization for Migration, in Thailand since 2018. Nina is the National Program Officer for the CRESS program. CRESS stands for Corporate Responsibility in Eliminating Slavery and Trafficking. It is a regional partnership initiative to advance human and labor rights of migrant workers in business operations and supply chains. Nina, welcome. Thank you for joining us on this Voices podcast.
Hi, Guna. Thank you for having me today. I'm glad to be part of this podcast.
IOM recently published a human resource guidebook on employer obligations and cultural sensitivity. Nina, please talk us through how the concept for such a guide came about, what you hope to achieve with the guidebook, and who this guidebook is for. I understand it is specifically for Thai employers of migrant workers.
Yeah, sure, Guna. So let me start with how the concept of such guidebook came about. Almost every time when we conduct knowledge need assessment with businesses, either for development of new tools, guidelines, or training, the most popular topic selected was on updated Thai national law and employer obligations. And another topic of cultural sensitivity or awareness is becoming more interest for brands and suppliers to be able to achieve more or better communication in workplace, especially with their migrant workers. So there is the need for this knowledge product. So that's how it came about. In terms of what I hope to achieve from this guidebook, let me draw back a bit. In Thailand, 10% of workforce in Thailand are migrant workers. So workers and employers are having different sexual orientation, gender identities, nationalities, ethnicities, and languages. So imagine how workforce are so diverse nowadays than before. To benefit from this diversity, workers and employers should learn how to communicate with each other and respect each other's culture. This would then likely leading to a more inclusive, desirable, and productive working environment. So that is the aim that we're trying to achieve from this guidebook. This guidebook will then provide or help businesses to navigate their role and responsibility as employers toward migrant workers that are required by Thai law. Compliance with legal obligation and labor rights standards demonstrates a first step for business commitment to building a decent working environment. That is basically to address the first knowledge needs on labor law. And the second part is this guidebook will help promote a decent and respectful working environment by providing an introduction to the workplace culture of migrant workers from diverse backgrounds. This will then help businesses to better integrate cultural sensitivity in their business operation and improve communication between employers and workers. So it's more like a combination of two sides of the needs into one guidebook. And I think your last question is more on who is this guidebook is for. Yes, you're right. It's for Thai employers because it's specifically on employer obligation according to Thai labor law. But not only employers, it also could be useful for human resource offices, interpreters, and local staff working directly with migrant workers, or actually general public who would like to learn more about this topic.
Thanks, Nina. Can you share a little more about how a new working environment can be challenging for migrant workers?
Migration and new working environment can be challenging for migrants, not only migrant workers, but anyone actually. Imagine traveling far from home with new community, network, language, with sometimes you not even understand the language where you will be working at, or a new culture. And this challenge should be recognized by employers, but it's not the case all the time. Migrant workers face language and cultural barriers, difficulties in accessing clear information on complex migration policies and procedures, and may avoid raising complaints due to power dynamics between workers and employers.
So how about the power dynamics between migrant workers and employers? and also some of the barriers for migrant workers to understand the employment processes or raise complaints or concerns.
Perhaps I could start with the barrier first. Largely, this is due to lack of availability of information in languages that migrant workers can understand, ranging from the employment contracts, orientation, and their rights and entitlement under Thai laws, which may not be provided in the language that they can understand. Second point would be on discrimination based on nationality, race, ethnic, and gender. Although Thai law requires that men and women must be paid equal wages for the same work. Regarding the power dynamic, some workers might got threatened with dismissal if they speak out against their employer. Plus, with the lack of effective grievance mechanism, which impede workers' ability to raise issues, or these mechanisms are not provided in the language that workers can understand.
So chapter 1 of the guidance is all about the rights and responsibilities of employers and workers under Thai laws. And so what can readers expect in this chapter?
So from this chapter, it's actually covered quite a big topics to cover because it ranges from recruitment until return phase of migration. So unless this podcast lasts 4 hours, I could not explain all the rights and responsibilities within this chapter. But perhaps let's start with the responsibility of employers, which I have grouped them in 5 categories. So this chapter will provide information on employer and migrant workers' responsibility and obligation on the topic of recruitment and hiring of migrant workers. For example, one key element of this topic would probably be on migrant workers must not be required to cover any portion of their service fees charged by recruitment agencies in cases where employer used the service of recruitment agencies in Thailand. The next subtopic under this chapter would be on prohibition of forced labor, which applies to multiple phases of migration, from recruitment, deployment, until employment. And the key elements from this chapter would probably be employer must not confiscate or withhold workers' identity document, even though this is for safekeeping. Next chapter would be on workplace standard and employment contracts, which include topics such as working days and hours, wages and payments, wage deductions, rest periods, holiday and leave entitlement, and severance pays in case the employer dismiss workers, which is not their fault. And then this will follow by the social aspects, social protection, which includes their employer obligation to enroll migrant workers in Social Security Fund and Workmen Compensation Fund benefits. So the workers will receive social benefits such as healthcare, pregnancy benefits, maternity leave, disability, and so on. And the last subsection within this chapter would focus on workers' rights to freedom of association and collective bargaining. A key point, key element, there's multiple, right? But the key one in this would be employer must not terminate the worker's employment contract if the workers participate in activities associated with collective bargaining, trade unions, or workers' organizations. Even though I have been talking a lot about employer obligations, there's also a section that is on the obligation of migrant workers itself. Migrant workers have to remember that they also have to follow Thai laws to work in Thailand regularly. So they have to make sure that they have valid work permits and visas, only do the type of work that their permits say they will do, and don't work in forbidden job categories like crafting, secretary work, and work as a street vendor.
And chapter 2 of the guidance is where I find it gets more interesting. It is all about cultural sensitivity and behavior at the workplace. Certainly, it is also about improving communication between workers and employers. So what can readers expect in this chapter?
I completely agree with you, Guna, that this chapter is very interesting. So what you can expect from this chapter is tips for being a cultural sensitive employer, and also some interesting tips about Cambodian culture and Myanmar culture and what should employers know. Why this topic is important? I think to harness the diversity in workplace, employers should create an environment that really allows workers from different cultures to interact and thrive. Being proactive and open to learning about the culture of workers, listening to what they have to say, and engaging workers in company activities would help employers build organizational trust.
What are some quick tips for a culturally sensitive employer? And what would you suggest as the top 3 things to bear in mind?
There's many tips and many ways, and of course depends on the company's setting and workforce and diversity. But if myself have to choose 3, It will probably be first one, invest time in knowing the workers' culture. Second one is listen to what the workers have to say. And the third is seek to be understood.
So Nina, what would be practical tips for employers to ensure worker voice in the place of work?
That would falls under my second suggestion that I just made, is that to be a good listener. So before implementing any significant changes or decision that will affect your migrant workers, seek their opinion on the topic. This can help in building employer workers' trust and generate workers' ownership over these areas of responsibility. Organize regular staff meetings to improve the flow of information between yourself as an employer and workers, and to create a common understanding of the company's goals, productivity, targets, and expectation. Another good thing is perhaps to be inclusive by being transparent and engage respectfully with all stakeholders of all genders, ethnicities, religion, nationalities, or their migration status. This could also include simple things such as support social, cultural, or religious activities that workers initiate, organize, and participate in. It could be simple as that.
And so the guide also provides some specific tips about Myanmar and Cambodian culture. Can you share with us some interesting tips about Cambodian and Myanmar culture and what employers should know?
Firstly, I have to say that both Cambodia and Myanmar have rich histories and diverse populations. They each are inhabited by different ethnic and religious groups, which may differ significantly from each other. This guide therefore flags to employers only general consideration when it comes to cultural sensitivity in relation to these countries. It does not accommodate differences among groups or individual within each country. So I would suggest that employers or whoever using this guide should use it with caution. In general, here are some interesting tips employers should know on the culture of Cambodia and Myanmar. First one would be on gender. So to show gender sensitivity about culture aspects of gender, when greeting women, men should wait to see if they extend their hand first. Some women may prefer not to shake hand or have direct physical interaction with men. In this case, smiles are not considered a polite gesture. This could also be applied to other activities or engagement that you're doing in your workplace as well. Second one is at the initial meeting, employer may wish to ask workers about their preference for name and title when being addressed. Assigning a new name or nickname is considered inappropriate and disrespectful by many Cambodians and Myanmar people. My third point would be when making conversation, talking about family, work, and home country is considered polite by many and very much appreciated by workers. So this could be your ice-breaking or daily conversation of your workers to ensure that they feel comfortable to talk to you in the workplace as well. And my last point would be on most culture value a positive public image, some more than others. A positive public perception is also very important for many Cambodians and Myanmar workers, and to be honest, in other culture as well. To be cultural sensitive on this aspect, in normal situation, of course, not involve any danger or exploitation, employers should consider providing workers with constructive feedback in private to make sure that it can be received without any fear of public humiliation. Second point is adopting non-aggressive, non-offensive, gentle, and constructive language when communicating with workers. One that focuses more on solution rather than pointing out mistakes or criticizing. Next one is complimenting workers for their good work in public and private. And the last point is demonstrating an effort to be friendly and showing interest in individual feedback. Another good tip to ensure effective communication and to avoid that some of your migrant workers may not feel comfortable admitting a lack of understanding of the topic of conversation. Here are some quick tips that you could use in your workplace. First one is use simple, non-technical language. Second one is provide example that helps workers to place new knowledge in the context. Another good point is that ask workers open-ended questions like what, when, where, how, why. Questions to summarize or rephrase what they say, rather than having yes or no questions, as workers may not feel comfortable disagreeing with employers, and to perhaps try to rephrase the question again to double check that workers understood fully. And do not always take a smile for a yes or enjoyment, and do not always take a yes for agreement or understanding.
Okay, so what about body language?
For Cambodian workers that I just learned myself as well, is that pointing in general may be considered cultural inappropriate for many. So many Cambodians instead use their mouth to point towards the object or a person. This is no means as an offensive gesture. And another interesting facts about Myanmar workers that I just learned as well is that folding arms when listening is considered by many as a sign of respect or attention to the speaker, which this might be perceived as offensive act in other culture. So yeah, I found these two facts and these 2 points interesting and new things that I just learned.
Thanks, Nina. Having worked in the region, I agree. Folding arms is a sign of respect, and I absolutely agree. A smile or a yes does not always mean approval or agreement. A guide such as this is obviously set out to achieve a workplace environment where migrant workers feel acknowledged, accepted, and valued regardless of nationality. And I quote from the guide, cross-cultural communication can have a positive impact on employer-worker relations only when workers are provided with decent working conditions and treated respectfully and are not discriminated against. So Nina, what are some of the benefits to the employer and business?
So business will achieve a workplace environment that is more inclusive and desirable. When workers know that they are respected and that their skills, experience, and perspective are welcome and valued, they tend to show improved performance. Workers also choose to stay with a company when they are satisfied with the job and the company environment. And of course, there are other factors as well that influence whether they will stay or they leave. Also, an increasing number of businesses globally have pledged to expand their corporate values to place a greater focus on social responsibility. Therefore, businesses that are able to demonstrate that they have introduced policies and measures to achieve this goal are likely to fare better in competitive environment. And as you rightly mentioned, Guna, that positive impact on employer-worker relation would be achieved only when workers are provided with decent working conditions, treated respectfully, and are not discriminated against. So my last point would probably be that to build a respectful workplace, first and foremost, employers must ensure that basic rights of migrant workers, at the minimum, those outlined in relevant national law, are met.
Lastly, Nina, how will this guidebook be distributed to employers, HR managers, or interpreters?
We have launched a guidebook during our business events in the past couple of months to more than 100 Thai businesses already. It's currently available on IOM publication website and midthai.com, a website for employers and migrant workers in Thailand. It will also be shared wider through our business network, including IHRB, who have already provided or shared our guidebook to your members already. So thanks for that as well.
Nina, thank you very much for sharing with us about the new resource guide.
Thank you for having me as well.
And thank you to our listeners. You can download the Human Resource Guidebook on employee obligations and cultural sensitivity in the link provided in this podcast description page. Thank you.